It was just after midnight when Officer Greg Holt walked into the dusty little grocery store on Pine Hollow Road. The place was supposed to be closed. The sign even said closed. But the lights were on. And inside, behind the counter, the shopkeeper was standing perfectly still, smiling, but not blinking. When Greg called out, the man didn't move. But what made the officer draw his gun wasn't the man. It was the shadow that moved behind the shelves. A shadow with no body. Chapter 1: A Store That Never Sleeps. Greg Holt had been a police officer in the quiet Appalachian town of Black Hollow for nearly 14 years. He knew everyone. Every road, every dog, every weird corner of town. But Pine Hollow Grocery had always felt odd. It was old, wooden-floored, smelled like mothballs and lemon wax. Run by an older man named Albert Finch, who had taken it over from his father. That store had stood since 1901. People said it never really closed. They said old Mr. Finch worked there day and night. But Greg had never seen it open past 10 p.m. So, when dispatch got a call about screaming from inside the store after midnight, Greg figured it was a drunk raccoon or a prank. He rolled up in his cruiser, headlights cutting through the fog that always sat like soup on Pine Hollow. The sign said closed, but the inside lights glowed yellow. And the door was wide open. He walked in slowly. Mr. Finch. The man behind the counter was still as a wax statue. Albert Finch. Wearing his usual beige sweater and round glasses. But something was wrong. His pupils were huge. His chest barely moved. He smiled like he was expecting Greg. That same unsettling grin. "Evening, Officer Holt," Albert said. But his lips hadn't moved. Greg blinked. "Sir, you okay?" No reply. Then the sound. A soft scraping from the far aisle. Like something dragging over the wooden floor. Greg stepped back and reached for his flashlight. The store felt colder now. The air smelled of something sickly sweet, rotting apples. He turned the light toward the noise. Nothing. Then, a shape darted past the shelf, black. Low to the ground, but moving impossibly fast. Greg drew his sidearm. "Who's there? Come out now." Silence. Greg turned back toward Albert Finch. He was gone. Chapter 2: The Ledger. Greg called it in. Backup was 15 minutes away. He knew that. He stepped cautiously toward the counter. Albert had vanished. No sound. No back door creaked. Nothing. On the counter sat an old leather ledger. Cracked and dusty. The kind folks used back in the 1920s to track purchases. He flipped it open. Inside were names. Lots of names. People from town. Some dead. Some still alive. Some missing. Each name had a date next to it and a word. Paid. Unpaid. Greg's stomach dropped when he saw his own name. Gregory Holt, unpaid. The date was tomorrow. Chapter 3: The Basement. The sound came again. But now, it was coming from beneath the floor. Scraping. A groan. Then, a whisper, "He's coming." Greg found a trapdoor behind the counter. It had old brass hinges and a rusted lock that had long since broken. He opened it. A wooden stairwell led into darkness. At the bottom, a flickering lantern glowed. "This is stupid," he muttered, but climbed down anyway. The basement was wide, stone-walled, and freezing cold. Along the walls were shelves. But not for groceries. They held jars. Hundreds of them. Each jar had a human tooth inside. Labeled with names. He scanned them. Martha Green. Dale Hopkins. Janie Finch. Then he found one labeled Albert Finch. Greg turned. In the far corner, something moved. It was a figure. Wrapped in burlap and wire. Face covered in what looked like wax. Hands bound. It shuddered as if breathing. He stepped closer. It was Albert. The real Albert. Still alive. Chapter 4, The Thing Upstairs. Greg cut the cords. Albert's mouth opened but no sound came. His eyes wide with terror, he pointed up. Then Greg heard it. Footsteps above them. Slow, heavy. Back up in the store. Something was pretending to be Albert. Something ancient. Something that lived off memory and names. Greg grabbed the lantern and led Albert up the stairs. When they reached the top, the store looked different. Older. Dustier. The shelves were warped. The cans rusted. Cobwebs everywhere. And behind the counter stood the thing. It wore Albert's face like a mask. But it wasn't him. It was too tall. Its eyes too black. Its fingers were wrong, too long. You shouldn't have come, it said in a voice that sounded like many voices at once. Greg raised his gun. It laughed. You can't shoot what isn't real. Chapter 5, Paid in Full. Albert reached out and whispered something. Greg heard it just barely. The ledger. Burn it. Greg turned and grabbed the book. The thing screamed. The shelves shook. The jars downstairs shattered. He lit a match. Threw it on the book. Flames erupted. The thing screamed like 1,000 voices crying out at once. It stumbled back, its face melting, revealing a shifting, black mass underneath. The fire spread fast. The store began to crumble. Greg and Albert ran out just as the front windows blew out with a blast of heat. The fire crews came. But by then, the store was ash. They found no bodies. No bones. Nothing. Epilogue, 1 week later. Greg sat at his desk, nursing a coffee, eyes tired. Albert was staying with his daughter out of town. Then a call came in. Sir, we got a problem. A new store opened where Pine Hollow Grocery used to be. But what? It says it's been there since 1901, and the man behind the counter, he says his name is Gregory Holt. Greg dropped the phone. The end.